Our next presenter, Carol Hulls, from Mechanical and Mechatronics, and it's also a first-year course that she will be talking about. In Carol's case, she's posting some of the facts online for the students that she doesn't need to be around while talking about the logistics of if statements and loops and stuff. And she's taking the in-class time to help them in the programming process of their programs. So yeah, Carol, please.
Okay. Yeah, I was really interested actually with the talk earlier about that strategic timing, because that is one of the reasons why I got very much into using this approach, was the strategic timing. And so just kind of a few things a little bit here just to kind of start off and say, what do I mean by these online mini lectures here? And what I'm looking at is they're very, very short videos. I did initially start off with saying, hey, if I'm going to replace an entire lecture, this should be 50 minutes from beginning to end. And I got a lot of feedback about that being the incorrect approach there. And so very much broken down by topic. The topics themselves, each of the videos range between about a minute to about 8 minutes is what I have for these videos. Now, what happens is, in the early weeks, and again, this very much comes into the strategic timing, is students access the video. That's as far as I can go. I can't tell whether they've watched it, but they do have to access the video. And then to make sure that they have done that, they are going to be completing that quiz. And what does that allow me to do in my course? Well, I'm teaching first-year digital computation for mechatronics students. And first-year digital computation for mechatronics students means I have students who come in there and most of them don't know how to program before they come in. That's surprising for people to hear that, but about 60% have no background, and there has to be this common set of facts before we can do anything interesting. You have to know how to set up your program. You have to know some of the syntax, and then there's some other things like, oh, it'd be nice if they could only just format this correctly, and that's always material. There's no design, there's no excitement in it. It's like, hey, this is how you comment your code. This is how you type it in. And so I've been able to gather up in the entire course. I figure that they've got 36 hours of lecture material they're supposed to get from me. What they get is 4 hours that is online, and that means 4 hours when I am not in the classroom. Now, for mechatronics students, they do already have some shifting that goes on because we do take midterm week off. So there's usually 3 makeup lectures that they've kind of moved elsewhere. In this case, I used this whole term, I used 1 hour of that makeup lecture, 4 hours online, and then it was like, oh, midterm week, I'll give you 3 of them back. November 21st, that's a Saturday, I don't want to be here, you don't want to be here, I'll give you that one back as well. The other one I gave them back was the day before project day. So it's that being able to say, early on in the term, we'll learn some facts before we can go anywhere, and then what you wind up in the course with me at the front of the room is 32 person hours. Now, what does an online mini lecture look like here? And I'll just play this. This is not an entire lecture. I've just cut part of it out here. But let's try and... The sound didn't come on this one, even though we had the sound working on it. So what I would be doing here at this point is I would be talking about comments here. And then because I teach on a tablet, it is really very similar to what they would get with me in the classroom. So I'm still talking here. Why? Wonderful technology. Well, what it's supposed to be doing is you would actually see me come into this and you would see me draw on that tablet. You would see that code there. So it really is exactly the same thing as I do in the classroom, but the difference is that it has been packaged into that mini lecture. Now, what does the quiz look like? Well, the quiz, I'm just using Learn in terms of putting together the quiz. And so here's typical question on my quizzes. They are about 10 to 20 questions depending on their multiple choice, their fill in the blanks. And this comes to the key thing that I've discovered with doing this approach is, what do I put in those lectures? And the big thing I put in those lectures are things that are drill and practice. They're facts, right? Up here, what I've got for this set of questions, this is, how do you declare your variables? Well, there's specific rules. Right? You can't choose the first one here as that double because it's a word in the language. That's not something we need a discussion at the front of the room about. That's just the way it is. And that's something where the students are going to learn this material, drill and practice. In fact, I think they learn a lot of it on the quiz because they're allowed to do these quizzes an unlimited amount of times, drift back and forth, between those lectures. So that's what I've got, as I say, kind of short answer, multiple choice quizzes, and my mini lectures here. And the reason for that is I want that knowledge early on in the beginning of the term. I have 12 weeks of assignments, well, 11 because we don't get midterm week. And if I take a week and a half to discuss background material, that means there are 2 labs where it's like we can't do much other than just kind of a program beyond the screen and then do something. Whereas in this case, I get that background knowledge to them, I get that out there really early, and so by the second week, we're already doing interesting things in our code. For those of you in the computer side, I've got if statements on my second assignment that is on like the second week Monday. I have loops by that third week. And that gives them that background knowledge. It gives them an extra whole week to practice. And I see that when it comes into the midterm. I see that when it comes into the final exam, that extra week of practice. And it really is that scheduling flexibility, right? I get an extra week of practice. Later on, it's project season. You're all completely busy with your project. You're going to get that time back. Now, one thing that's a contrast to the Rec 100 that we heard about is all of my students out of my 200, with the exception of 7 students, they have exactly the same timetable. So what I'm really doing is I'm recognizing that in their timetable, your first few weeks, not much is going on in calculus and algebra. You can learn some more programming. Later on, when calculus and algebra have got difficult and you're working on my project, you're going to spend less time with me. Now, the other thing about this is that again, it matches very well with this material. And this comes into I have experimented. I started doing this in winter 2014 in terms of making those decisions. And there are times that it's like, oh, maybe this should be a mini lecture, maybe this should not be a mini lecture. And I found there's an interesting divide. If I can get a topic that is strictly fact-based, this is the way it is, do your drill and practice on the quiz, the students perform better on the exam, the students to learn that topic. If I don't get the topic right, it doesn't go well. And so what had happened in one of my early experiments with this, I thought, reading from a file. Okay, I'm getting a number, I'm getting a letter, I'm getting a group of letters. To me, that was something very mechanical. And I thought, perfect, online lecture. I put that out into the online lecture and the students really learned it badly. And what it made me go back and think and say, oh yeah, once you get beyond that first step of what you're reading from a file, there gets to be that decision of, am I reading in a line? Am I reading in 20 things? Am I reading in 30 things? And at that point, it was like, you need that dialogue in class. I mean, it made me feel great because it's like, oh, I know why I'm going to class, right? Because we're going to have that discussion. The next term when I taught it and it came back into the class lecture, I was very aware of, yes, I'll talk about this, but we're going to have this discussion of how you're going to do that. And that's where my students need that discussion. So I do have to be very careful with what topics I picked. Now I'm going to put this up here. Videos can be reused in subsequent terms. Because everything is very tied to that schedule and I'm playing around with the schedule, I find about half of my videos can be used from term to term. It's getting slightly better, but it still really is I want to make sure this topic is taught before this day. So not all of them come into that. Now, as I mentioned here, topics are ones that don't involve that discussion. When I run it, students are given 1 week to watch the video. And this is the other thing that gives me a lot of a challenge, because in my course in first year programming, it's like, I teach you this and then you can use it and I build and I build and I build. There's like one topic I've got in the entire term that doesn't rely on the previous topics. And yet in this case, I've got to find something that it's like effectively 3 lectures in my schedule between when this can be released to the students to when I can rely on that being known. And so that gives me a lot of challenge every term. Again, they give me different days of the week that I'm doing my lectures on, and so I'm rearranging everything again. And so that's why, as I say, things like, for me, formatting things on the screen, it's like, well, I'll have badly formatted stuff for a week, and then we all know about that formatting. Now, another thing that comes into that a little bit, again, I have to be aware that some students have watched the videos, some students haven't watched the videos in lectures, but as soon as we've got that 1 week and you're supposed to have done your quiz and that's that deadline, that next lecture, I'm using that material. And especially in those early weeks, because that gives the students the message that it's like, hey, there was a lecture, it occurred, you should have paid attention to it, and I'm going to rely on that. And I'm not going to let you kind of push me into, like you did in winter 2014, of reteaching it because you skipped the quizzes. And that actually came into winter 2014 when I set it up. I thought, here's videos, here's quizzes. I'm optimistic. The quizzes are available and the videos are available. And well, about 60% of them kind of, watched the videos and then went to the quizzes, and the other ones went straight to the quizzes. So now you can't see my quizzes unless you see that video, right? One of the things here, keeping the videos short, again, I was very much when I started in this of I'm replacing a lecture. This will be 50 minutes. But what happened is the students drift back and forth. They watch the videos, sure they got to access them all before they can get to the quiz, but then they'll try the quiz, and because they've got an unlimited number of times on these quizzes, and they're not even really sophisticated quizzes, right? It's like I scramble the answers on it. They'll go back to those videos. The thing I find interesting is over half the class will access the video more than once. Half will access them once, but I don't know how many are downloaded on that review step. But I will have students that will go back to that video 5 or 6 times. And so they have to be short because it's like, oh, I did the 10 quiz questions and this topic I didn't get. So I want to go back and do that quiz. And that's what I say. Over half of those students are accessing them more than once. Now, how do I put these videos together? I have taught with a tablet for many years, so that's something very natural for me. And then I think it was Samar who said, well, hey, why don't you videotape your lectures? And so what I started using in lectures as well was just my tablet, just Camtasia. And you could see there, you didn't get the chance to see me writing, but that's all I'm doing in my office is just taking that video, pretty much kind of giving it in my office instead of in my lecture. Now, having said that, this is going to take longer than you ever thought it will. It is going to take longer than you ever thought it will, even after you've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. When I videotape my lectures, the students get what they get, right? I wander away from the podium, I go talk to the students over here, they have to figure out sound levels. But I do think that there should be, for an online lecture, some sort of minimum quality in there. I am getting better in terms of doing a take, but for example, I'll do 30 minutes of video and that will be cut down into about 5 minutes by the time I've got rid of the mistakes and the going back and those kind of things. So it is still a bit of a challenge, and that comes into a little bit of this idea of saying how many of them can I reuse. So beginning of the term, quite frankly, I just like the online lectures because I run out of time at the beginning of the term and I'm always trying to get them out for that week. The students there in 1A, they're not thrilled about the online lectures either. They've come out of high school and they say, our workload is really hard and you're making these online lectures. And even though I'll kind of get 1 or 2 students, it's like, oh, they go good with laundry. And they do, right? Because it's something that it's like, I can be doing my laundry in residence and watching this video. This is the beginning of term. By the time I get to the end of term, the students are so glad that we have done those online videos because it's like, oh yeah, we're not coming in 8:30 Monday morning, right? And it's just a complete difference between like kind of the first division meeting and the second division meeting with those students in terms of they love the online videos. And by this time I like them again because I see the effect on the students and I'm also taking the lectures off as well. Now, as I say, my quizzes, I'm administering them through Learn. It is 10 to 20 short questions. The quizzes themselves are worth all of 0.5% of the overall course grade. And that is enough because they are short, because they learn, because they're 1A Mechatronics students and they've never had a mark taken off. That is enough for them to pretty much, I would say it's about 97, 98% of the class will do the quizzes. And of that, there will only be 1 or 2 students that will get something other than 100 on the quiz because I do have that unlimited number of attempts. And all of this goes into what I tell the students at the beginning of term. I say, why are we doing this? I say, we're doing this to change time, to change space, giving us that flexibility. And I also tell them that the reason why they're doing these quizzes is to learn. So I don't care how many times they take to learn that material. I want them to know that material. And again, everything in my course that is pretty much in terms of that formative assessment is worth a low amount. Their weekly programming assignments are only worth 0.8% each. So it is that very small amount. As I mentioned, they do need to access the videos before the quiz is available. I do allow late special access. This, again, relates to kind of first-year students. I don't think I'd be doing this with upper-year students, but that first week when I get into that lecture and it's like, I'm using that material and all the students are coming to me afterwards, and there's usually about, I'd say, probably across the 200 students, there's about 10 students that it's like, I didn't watch the video, I didn't know it was there, I didn't listen to the things you've been telling me over and over again all week long because I'm in 1A, and that those ones I will grant them the access to them, generally with the scolding of, you're in first year, you got to start watching your deadlines, and then there is usually 1 or 2 each week after that it's like, oh, I forgot they were coming, but they do always remember when I use those concepts in those lectures. And as I said before, that it's 2 to 5 times is that very typical one. Now, it's really, as I say, it's well received at end of term, right? Once they get kind of realizing what the first year workload is going to be there. But the biggest thing I think that has that significant impact is that just being able to say, I can practice with challenging course concepts 1 week earlier. That's another week to get them to practice with those concepts, another week to give them feedback. When they have to do design of computer programs on my midterm, they're better at it. When they have to do short answer questions on these little picky details, they're better at that because it matches what they had on the quiz. So that is probably the biggest reason that makes this worthwhile. The other thing, though, I really like is that it reminds me that the lecture time is that discussion, that dialogue between myself and the student, where I get up there and I present something. I'm expecting them to ask questions for it. I'm expecting to give that question and answer. And in those first couple of weeks, I've taken a couple of those topics that can really kind of deaden a lecture for 5 or 10 minutes, and I've moved them to that online. I don't have to teach them. I've moved them into a way that's very good for working on it. But it does take extra time and effort, and as I say, not all videos can be reused from term to term and things. And for some reason this is my bad order on PowerPoint here, that facts, right, I really emphasize that that was a lecture in terms of what I'm doing. So that's all I've got formally set off to talk about it, but questions?
Thanks, Carol. I understand exactly where you're coming from. Why do you, though, use, if these are simple facts, you know, like learning basic formatting and so on, isn't it easier just to use a little handout or a standard textbook, you know, copy the first chapter of a textbook and students read it, rather than going, from your point of view, the trouble of making a video or multiple videos with these simple ideas?
I think some of it comes into a philosophical thing with me of things that sort of the deal is I'm going to provide you with 36 lecture hours. And so when I get to the tendency of pushing something in terms of a reading, it's like, I don't know, I guess I kind of feel guilty or something about that fact of I just sent that to you and now I'm taking a lecture hour off. So it really is very much things that I have traditionally included in that lecture, and I'm making that strong trade-off in their mind of this is a lecture and I want you to treat this material the same way as I treat everything else. So it is a bit of a philosophy.
Just along that same line, I mean, you do it with a tablet, so would the students be able to get it the material the same way from a handout? I mean, or is the process of walking through it in the tablet helping them to learn it?
I do think it helps. I mean, that's why I tend to, for me at least, certainly even in the classroom, I tend to do that tablet, see that development. Some of it also comes into a little bit of experience too, in that generally, because I've taught this course for about 7 years now, 7 or 8 years, I know what questions they're going to answer, and so you can get that kind of question and answer format even though I'm talking to myself on that video. But again, it becomes the routine question and answer of this is the logistics of this. I know half of you are going to ask me this, as opposed to that need to have that dialogue. So it would be something the students would ask me, and I just give you that information.
So the question I have is on the concept of flipped classroom. I'm in computer science, and one question was always, what exactly are we going to do during lectures if we are going to put some of the material online? And maybe I missed it in your presentation, but it seems that you simply just gave them time off. So you didn't introduce any special activities in class where we are talking about, you know, the meaning of pointers in our life and stuff like that, right?
Again, this kind of goes back to a little bit of the philosophy I have when I'm doing this is I am saying that there's going to be 32 lectures where we are going to get together and meet, and there are going to be 4 lectures that are going to be asynchronously where you are going to attend that lecture at your own time. And so that means for me, and again, it is very much a personal choice, I'm choosing not to replace that time with that meet time. I'm saying we will take that off. I've just shifted it towards the beginning part of the term.
I love that idea. It's just when I was introduced to flipped classroom, right, it was you do information online and then you discuss in class. But I do think that a lot of students would appreciate, you know, having a little bit more flexibility.
Some of it, I think, comes a little bit of my background because I've done, for the Canadian Engineering Accreditation Board, when we come in and we look at a program, one of the things we do is we wind up counting lecture hours and seminar hours and lab hours, and we have this weird system where we count anything. And I had done that before coming to this model, and so I have a feeling that it influenced me in that sense of it's like, oh, I have to have 36 things that if anybody asks me from the CAB, these are going to be lectures, and these are not going to be lectures. But that meant that I had a lot more buy-in for what I was doing from the students, because it is that thing of, you know, okay, we're grumbling about them, but you tell us I'm giving the time back in the term. And so I'm really saying I'm just shifting this. I am not adding to your workload. And given what other things add to their workload as 1A Mechatronics, I'm guilty of that on other fronts, but at least not on terms of my lecture hours.
Yeah, my question's about moving content or hours forward in the term. You sort of commented that you know 193 of them and you know exactly what they're doing. Did you coordinate in any way with the other first-year profs to let them know that, you know, you were shifting effort forwards, or how did that work?
In terms of coordination, I have one advantage with the 1A Mechatronics program in that 3 out of the 5 courses are very linked in terms of what they do with course project and towards end of term. And because I'm the person who adores the spreadsheet, somehow I wound up doing a lot of that coordination for those 3 courses. The other flip of it is we've had discussions with calculus and algebra, and again, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I know that what they are doing in this first couple of weeks is high school review. And so that is some of what gives me the freedom. But I would agree, if you're in an upper year course and everybody decides to do this, you've got problems.
We have a question over email. Does having the online captures of the lectures and or the mini lectures increase the quality of the questions that the students ask, or does it help with dialogue with the students?
I would say, yeah, I would say it actually does improve, because there's always some questions that you get in lectures that it's like, you know, person A over here asked this, and then person B asked it again. You give this clarification, and the rest of the class has got it. And they're like, okay, all right, how can they not see that? And that pushes that onto the drill in practice. So what it leaves me in sort of my regular 32 lectures is it leaves me the better topics, it leaves me the better questions from that. So, I mean, I don't want to label any of my first year students as dumb questions, but that's what really, it kind of pushes the dumb questions over here. It can open up a dialogue as well, because we can get into the situation of, you know, why my tutors will ask me, and it's like, who's struggling in the course? And it's like, well, let's open up what's happening, and we can see that this student took this quiz 10 times, and this student took this quiz 14 times, and it's like, okay, I don't know what's going on in their life, but maybe that's a contact that we should be making. So it is a way of opening that dialogue, or even you get a student that it's like, I didn't understand it, and so it's a reason to come in to talk to us, which we struggle to get them in 1A, to say, come in because you didn't know what the online quizzes were, you didn't know what the answer was, you want to either try it again before due date to get your 100%, or you've heard rumors that we'll let you do the quiz again even after the due date and get your 100%.
Okay. Any other questions for Carol? Okay, I kind of had a question about the students' feedback. So you mentioned that the midterm like marks or response to questions was better. So how about their final? So by the end, they will all catch up, whether it was an online, it has the online component or not?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to say with the regards to the final exam, partly because it's that whole what caused things. I mean, I'm seeing interesting things in terms of my class later on in the term, in terms of I'm getting better engagement. I'm certainly getting better questions in the final exam. The grades are up. But at the same time I started playing with the mini lectures, I started also doing lecture capture across the board. So while I can look at it and say the questions that I have on the midterm that are specific to the topics in the mini lectures are doing better, and while they seem to be doing better in the lab sessions, I don't know whether that overall is kind of contributed to this, or whether it's that I'm doing the lecture capture as well, or both.
I have a question. Why only 4 hours? Surely there's enough mundane material in a first-year programming course that you could bump that up to 6 hours or 8 hours. Was it 4 just because of the way you shuffled things around, or?
I think it's a combination. Some of it has to do with how far can I shuffle the timing around. That's my first constraint. The other one is, I agree there are more mundane hours, and there were certainly topics that I was teaching in the second half of this term that I was going, why isn't this an online lecture? But part of it comes into also that independence. It is, you can get a mundane topic that I cannot wait a week between when you are ready to be introduced to this topic to when I need to use it. And so then I've got to keep it in that lecture schedule. So that is one of the things I struggle with, is this topic can be learned anywhere in that week's time. And that's what kind of constrains me to the 4 hours.